Okay. Well, we're beginning a overview of the Bible, and it may be just a quick view of the whole Bible, but it also may be stopping at different places to sit down for a while and take a more detailed look at certain passages. And what we're doing this is part of a discipleship program here at Little Chapel Church, and this is just one part, so we can establish ourselves in a little better understanding of the Bible as a whole. I love the book. I've spent a lot of time in it. I think I've read now cover to cover at least 50 times in my life. And I wish I would have studied it more, but a lot of it I've just done more as devotional encouragement, which a lot of you do that, but as you go through and you do it a number of times, you become very familiar with what the Bible's all about. So we're going to start very basically and just say, when we talk about the Bible, it's often called the Bible or the Holy Bible, and Bible comes from a Greek word that means book, biblos. And so it's the Holy Book, and it's composed of 66 books, or some of them are letters, or when we get to the New Testament, a couple of them may be postcards, Philemon and 3rd John. They're kind of short, they may be postcards, but 39 books are in the Old Testament, and most of those became canonical, which means they became the measure of our faith because they're associated with a prophet. There's some kind of prophetic person behind the book that makes it authentic. And then 27 books in the New Testament, and most of those are associated with an apostle. And that's probably how they became to be part of the rule of our faith. There's about 40 authors. We don't know all of the authors for sure, especially like the book of Hebrews. Hebrews, in a lot of your Bibles it may say the letter of Hebrews, Paul's letter to the Hebrews, but we don't know that it was Paul. A lot of the books of the Bible, the letters, will have the name of the author in them, or there'll be things about them that we know who wrote the book. But Hebrews is a little different. We know that it was kind of like a second generation. If you read early on, I think chapter 1 or 2, it says, we've heard from those that were eyewitnesses of him. So it's somebody that didn't necessarily see Jesus himself, but heard from those who did. Okay, and that could be Paul, or it could be others. If you want to write a book, there's a lot of books written about who wrote Hebrews. Even, some people I've seen. I think it was who are the couple? Oh, anyway, that traveled with Paul in the book of Acts. I mean, there's just been all kinds of people writing books about who wrote Hebrews because we don't know for sure. The Bible was composed over 1,500 years, which is amazing because of the common themes, and that's one of the things we'll look at as we look through is the themes that go all the way through the Bible. There's themes like blood sacrifice. One theme I like is the house of God. Where's God going to live here on earth? And so there's themes like that throughout the Bible. Most of them start in Genesis, which we'll look at pretty soon, and they go all the way through. So when we're looking at the Bible, there's a term that's used that kind of sums up with how the Bible is written, and we call it Christo-Centric or Christ-centered. And that means that basically the whole Bible is focused on Jesus Christ, the Messiah. Christos, Christ, and Messiah basically mean the same thing. It's the anointed one. And so the whole book is focused on him. That's why in Luke 24:44, Jesus, when he was walking on the road to Emmaus, he was talking to the disciples, the couple that was with him, and he says he taught them from the law and the prophets and the Psalms. And he's taught them all about himself. He was revealing himself out of all of those places. And that's basically kind of talking, it's talking about the divisions of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Scriptures. Presently, the Hebrew Scriptures are divided into 3 sections. The first part's called the Law, and it deals with the first 5 books of the Bible, often called the Law of Moses or the Pentateuch, Penta meaning 5, or sometimes just referred to as the Torah. The Torah also refers to the Old Testament Scriptures in general, or the revelation of God. Sometimes even oral tradition is included in Torah. But the Bible is divided into that first section, the law, then the prophets, and that takes in all of the major prophets, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, which are not major because they're bigger than the other guys. Just the writings are longer. And then there's the 12, they call them in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew Scriptures, 12 minor prophets. And it also includes such books as Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel, Kings, some of that. So the prophets, and then the last section is the writings, what they call now. And the writings start with the book of Psalms, and it carries Ecclesiastes, Job, Proverbs, and it actually ends with 1st and 2nd Chronicles. So the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Scriptures, end with Chronicles, while most of what we have in our modern New Testament, or Bible, the Old Testament ends with Malachi. And so there's a little difference there. But when Jesus was talking, some people say at that time the Bible, the Scriptures were only divided into the law and the prophets, and you'll see that when Jesus is referring to, things that were written by him, or referring to the Testament at the time, which was our Old Testament, he would say the law and the prophets. But in this case, he referred to also the Psalms, which the Psalms is the first book of the third section of the Hebrew Scriptures in our modern times. So some people think that it wasn't divided into three sections until about the 4th century after Jesus was born, but there are some references even before Jesus of 3 sections of the Old Testament. But for whatever reason, Jesus said the law and the prophets and the Psalms. And as we look at Psalms, you'll find out so many of the passages in Psalms point directly to Jesus. I mean, they're very specific. Even when it's talking about casting lots for his clothing when he died, none of his bones being broken when he was crucified. There's so many things specifically, and there's some Psalms that we even call messianic Psalms because they are so detailed about who Jesus would be and what would happen in his life. So we see those 3 divisions: Old Testament law, prophets, and writings. Now, when we start to look at the Bible in general, the whole book, like we said, is Christo-Centric, but it begins with 11 chapters in Genesis, which basically give us a quick summary of history from the time of creation till we get to the real important thing about what the Bible is about, to the time of God choosing a family through which he brings a nation through which he reveals himself to us on earth. This book is basically about God's dealings with a nation, and in his dealings with that nation, how he reveals who he is to the world. He had to choose one nation, one people, and that the one that he chose was Abraham. So that starts in Genesis chapter 12. The first part of the first 11 books are simply creation. We see when sin entered into the world, so we had the first signs of sin, we had the first signs of blood sacrifice, the first theme of redemption, how God's going to buy back his creation. We see the first murder. We see how evil the world got. It even says in there that in the day that Adam was born, he would die. And so people say, well, he didn't die that day he sinned, or on the day Adam sins, he would die. He didn't die in that day that he sinned. They say, but then people say, well, he died spiritually, and he did. But also there's this whole overriding theme, and it's all throughout the Bible, of this 1,000 years as kind of a sign of a perfect day. The day of the Lord, the millennial reign we talk about at the end of the age will be 1,000 years. This 1,000 years was a very specific thing, both in the Bible and some literature that was written around the time of the Bible. 1,000 years is called a day, like a day. In Peter, it even says, a day is as 1,000 years, 1,000 years as a day. So we see when Adam sinned, everybody in the Bible lived for, it's in those first few chapters, in the first part of the Bible, in the law, basically, a lot of the people there lived for a long time. The oldest one that lived was Methuselah, who lived to be 969 years old. What we find is no one made it to the 1,000 years. Adam lived 930 years after he sinned, but no one made it to that perfect 1,000 years. So in one sense, yes, he died spiritually the day he sinned, but he also didn't make that day of perfection. Like, in that day that you sin, you will die. And so there's kind of a theme through the Bible that this 1,000 years is kind of a picture of that perfect day. And Adam didn't make it through that either. So we're going to stop at this point in this first lesson.